Patricio and Alicia. So, hi. So excited to have you all. I have known each of these people. Alicia is my sister, so I've known her entire life. Patricio and Jessica I've known since I was a teenager. So the incredible thing is when we were young, just like I tell all of you, that you all are each other's network 10 years from now, 20 years from now, like you all will be doing amazing things together. When we were young, I used to say, we used to talk about the things that we wanted to do in 10 or 20 years, you know, and how we wanted to help empower like the next generation of like, you know, scientists and technologists like us. And so when I reach out to my friends and, you know, to do something like this, it's just an exciting opportunity for us to come together and share our journeys and stories, and especially theirs, you know, with all of you, because this is something that we're all very passionate about. And we were in your shoes, you know, 10, 20, 30, well, I won't age us, but a while ago. When I was doing check-ins with all of you, and I think I've checked in with every one of you intensively throughout the summer, the biggest thing that people were in between, it's like this internship has helped you solidify your interest and your passion in STEM, but you're very much like, I don't know if I want to do research. I don't know if I want to go into industry. I think I might want to go into industry first and then go into research. I think I might want to be a professor, but I'm not sure what that means. I think I might want to get an advanced degree, but then I'm not sure if I want to do academia or industry. And I thought, you know, most of what the uncertainty is that we don't know what those journeys look like. We don't know what it looks like to pursue, you know, a graduate degree and why. We know that we like the research, but do we want to apply it in industry? Do we want to apply it in academia? We know that we like teaching, but is being a professor all about teaching, or you're also leading a research lab? I didn't know these things when I was your age, you know, and then a lot of you are also expressing interest in industry and tech. And my sister went directly into tech and many times battled, you know, this kind of like pressure that she felt to get an advanced degree, ultimately chose to do different things, and I'll let her tell more of her story. But I thought that you all could really benefit from hearing these three distinctly separate journeys. And also kind of demystify a little bit about, do I belong in tech? I know that I've heard from many of you, I like computer science, but I took my first computer science class and I didn't like it. And so I don't know if computer science is for me. And you know, I hear this over and over again, and I have friends who are doctors and they're like, I failed my first Bio 1A class. You know, it doesn't mean that I wasn't meant to be a doctor. It just meant that that particular experience wasn't for me. And I don't know about you, Patricia, because we weren't like colleagues in college, but I know that Jessica definitely struggled in STEM classes. I know that Alicia, I'm sharing a little bit, was in the lowest math growing up and had to really work to get strong at math, and ultimately went to one of the best schools to get an engineering degree, but it was not a natural thing. So for some of you who are doubting your space or your place in this field because something doesn't come so natural to you, it doesn't mean anything, you know? And so because I know these panelists, I'm really excited for them to tell more of your stories. But I'm setting up a little bit of context as to why I reached out to these three amazing panelists. Patricio Vela is a tenured, so for those of you who don't know, tenure means you have to work really hard and prove yourself so that the university finally says, okay, we want you here forever. So he is a tenured faculty member in the electrical engineering department at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is one of the top engineering institutions in the world. He was born in Mexico City, got his undergrad and graduate degrees at Caltech, and then moved to Georgia Tech. I'll let him tell a little bit more of his story. Jessica is from Woodland. So I know there are quite a few of you who are from like Davis, Sacramento area. I'll let her tell a little bit more, but Woodland is a small farm town. She grew up, never thought that this big picture, like Silicon Valley biotech exec world was for her, but is killing it in biotech. She has had many incredible experiences in biotech and now is at the executive level. She did pursue a PhD, but chose not to go into academia and instead chose to go into industry. And I'll let her tell a little bit more of her story. And my sister, who, Alicia, raise your hand there. She looks like a smaller version of me. She is one of the youngest, she's a director, soon to be, I'm just putting it out there, senior director of product management at Etsy. So most of you probably know Etsy, one of the coolest tech companies in the Valley and in the world. And she did not choose to go into a advanced degree, but she'll tell her story, but in many cases has been promoted over people who chose to get advanced degrees because she had, you know, skill set and also incredible experiences that helped her just be able to be so much more of an impact to the global teams with which she works. Product management is probably the most competitive part of tech to break into. And she is already at the director level, managing in many cases people who are 10 years older than her. So I could not be more proud. And anyway, I'm going to turn this over to the amazing speakers. So I think when I ask a question, I'm going to ask a couple questions first to all of you, and then I'll start asking individual questions. And students, this is an interactive experience, and we have them until 12:15. So if you start to have questions, please put them in the chat, and I can moderate this discussion around the questions that you all have. Because at the end of the day, these speakers are here for you, okay? So please don't hesitate to start asking questions. And at the 15-minute mark, at the 12 o'clock mark, I will stop speaking and I will start asking you all to unmute yourselves and ask questions. And I encourage you to unmute and actually say your question to our speakers instead of just typing it in the chat, because they want to see your faces and hear your voices as well. Okay, so the first question is, you know, just give a little bit of background on, you know, who you are, your position now, and like in terms that our students can understand, like what is it that you do in your day-to-day today? Like what is your role? And I'll just let it, whoever wants to start, just unmute yourselves. Jessica, I see you smiling, so why don't you go for it?
Okay, so my name is Jessica. I am Senior Director of Clinical Affairs and Health Economics at a medical device startup. And so what I do actually is we have a medical device and we need to demonstrate that it's safe and effective so that the FDA will approve it, so that people like yourselves can use it to help them with their medical issue. And so I work with doctors to design studies and then carry out those studies. And then, so that's kind of the researchy part of my job. Then I take those results and I write them up, I package them in a different ways to make it understandable for the FDA, but also to make it understandable for other doctors and patients so that when we are eventually on the market, we are able to use those results to help people understand that this is a product that could help them.
And Jessica, do you want to just give a little brief bio of you? And like, I said a little bit, but like in your words.
Okay, so Marissa mentioned I'm from a town called Woodland. It's near Davis, Sacramento area. It's a small farm town. So if you ever buy Roma tomatoes at the grocery store, they probably came from Woodland. Same thing for any canned tomatoes. They probably also came from Woodland, but I left Woodland and went to Berkeley for undergrad and grad school. And that was a huge change for me because the Bay Area is a lot more diverse. Woodland is pretty much half white, half Mexican. So it's a lot more diverse in the Bay Area, and it was a lot more competitive. So in my town, there was one high school, it was Woodland High School. I lived on Woodland Avenue. And all of a sudden I'm with, 40,000 other people who are great at what they do. So I had to learn a lot, but I also had to learn to be resourceful. And I think that's one of the big, it's a skill that I think you can practice and you can grow, and it will help you no matter where you are in your work career to recognize, hey, I need help with something, and be able to reach out and talk with others to get what you need to move forward. And so I learned that at Berkeley, and it served me well in my career going forward. And I went from school directly out of my PhD. I hadn't even finished my PhD to start working in my first startup. I finished my PhD while I was at my first startup. And it's a small community. I'm sure you've heard network for jobs. That is 100% how it works. And I moved from my first job to the next job based on somebody I knew, to the next job based on somebody I knew. I have never moved jobs without already knowing someone there. So it's been true ever since I was in school. So that's my background and my tips at the same time.
I did not prep Jessica to say that. This whole summer, I've been working with them on networking and building relationships and saying that that is the #1 key to getting ahead. And Jessica, thank you for reinforcing, because they can hear the same thing from me and be like, yeah. But when they hear it from someone else, and Jessica, I did not tell them to say this, but it's absolutely true. Thanks. Patricio or Alicia?
I can go since she's, wait, am I muted? Oh, I see a thumb. Okay. Yeah, my name is Patricio Vela. I'm here at Georgia Tech, like you said. I'm going to go with who you are. I don't know. But my mom's from Venezuela. My dad is Salvadorian Mexican. I grew up mostly with a Salvadorian culture. Lived in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles. Now I'm here almost the same amount of time in each place. So you can think 888, except now here I've been in Georgia for something like 17 years when I thought it would just be 2 years. My kids are born in Atlanta, so I guess we're Georgians now. My position is as a professor at a university, and it's kind of interesting. It's almost like a combination of two things, of being a teacher and then sort of running your own little startup. The way to think about it is the job of being teacher is what sort of pays the bills. It's what the university does to pay me. And then the research is that I write grants, and that brings in more funding to the university and more funding to pay my salary, and then funding to pay for graduate students. It's like a startup because my lab is always small. It's never going to get big. It's not like a company with hundreds of employees. And it's like a startup because I always have to be pursuing new ideas. If something gets old that I'm doing, I have to shift because the funding runs out. You're constantly sort of trying to figure out what are the gaps. I do robotics. So what are the gaps in robotics? What can't robots do today? And what is it about robots that they can't do that a company couldn't do in the next 4 years or so? So I have to try to figure out where is the 5 to 10 year gap that companies aren't looking at, or they can't invest their time because it's too expensive. But once I invest the time, and your taxes to some degree help me invest that time, then the companies will use it to make money. And I think that's it. So the role is to teach undergrads, but also at the PhD level, one thing that I have to do is not just teach them. So an undergrad is sort of like you're developing the technical competency to excel at problems, but PhD is sort of not developing technical competency, interestingly enough. It's about being comfortable trying to figure out things that you don't know anything about and building that bridge. When you take a class, the teacher provides a syllabus. The syllabus has everything you need to know. And research is about how do you build the syllabus yourself when you don't even know it, but you have enough of a prerequisite that you can start to build that syllabus. And that's sort of tough to teach kids how to do. Then I think that's everything. The last thing, because you mentioned networking, I'm going to tell you, I'm a researcher, right? So I'm going to tell you a published research that says in fields where it is very difficult to quantify performance, what differentiates how far you go is your social or professional network. So what does that mean? If I'm a racer, I'm a runner, it's very easy to quantify performance. I can run that 100 yards in so many seconds. And no one can be better than me because no one can beat me in that many seconds. As long as I can run faster than everyone else and it's a number, then you win. But the minute the problem becomes complex, that you can't judge people based on some single number, what your success reduces to is the strength of your network and sort of how it behaves. Because these sort of subjective factors become the dominant factors in deciding whether one person is considered better than another. And network is one of those, and then your ability to sort of promote yourself is the other, and they're kind of intertwined. That's it.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm Alicia. My job is very hard to explain because fulfillment at Etsy is very new, but I work at Etsy, which if you don't know Etsy, it's like the anti-Amazon. Our mission is to keep commerce human. So we connect local artisans and entrepreneurs who are really trying to create anything. And then how do we get into the hands of our buyers, people like you who want to buy something, and it's all handmade and unique. And so the problem I'm trying to solve is how do we actually get those items from point A to point B without warehouses? And seems really like, what do you do then? That's the problem we're trying to solve. And so how do we help sellers really understand like what are their needs? We know that the faster you get at selling something, you can increase your sales exponentially. But so we build a lot of tools for sellers. We do everything from, imagine we go into a new market like Brazil. Okay, how do we get actual like integrations for shipping up and running so that we can ensure that we can sell labels to sellers and do it at an economic price? So you really think about we're commerce. We do everything along the way from helping sellers with eco-friendly packaging to one of the things that I'm really passionate about is like, how do we create a local commerce experience where places like New York City, we can create pop-up shops for sellers who maybe they don't have a actual online store, but then we can integrate and we can do things in the future like green last mile delivery. So think about what things like Facebook, what they're doing is DoorDash is connecting with Facebook Marketplace. Well, can we do that for Etsy? So I'm passionate about logistics, and that's kind of how I ended at Etsy. I have probably the anti-experience of most people in tech, which is that I am a director in product and I actually didn't do product management. I haven't done it for more than a year. I'm kind of very different from Jessica. Every job I've gone into, I didn't know anybody, but what drove me is the curiosity of a new challenge. And that's how I moved to Peru at some point to go help get Uber off the ground. I was in the highlands of Peru handing out flyers. And then I came to Walmart where they wanted to build a very similar thing to DoorDash. And then someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and was like, hey, do you want to come join Etsy? Had no idea, hadn't talked to anybody, did some research, and I landed here. So what has really driven me beyond the degrees is just like poking around, figuring out problems that I'm passionate about. I feel super challenging that I don't know anything about, working with really passionate people and then just doing it and kind of forgetting like, I have no experience in how to do this. And I promise you, like just asking questions and figuring things out, like breaking down a problem, that's probably the skill set that I bring to the table is like, give me a big problem and we're going to break it down. It always starts with people. So you have to learn how to work really well with people and how to collaborate. And so I know that I don't have all the strengths in the world, but probably my superpower is collaboration. And then I can work with a really smart engineer and we can figure out how to solve a problem. So just knowing that the sum of the parts is greater than each part together, that's kind of like what I bring to the table. So it's a little bit about me.
Amazing, all of you. I loved hearing your stories. I don't know about the students, but I really loved hearing. I think you all brought such amazing insights. So let's take it a little bit back because, we're coming out of COVID. There are a lot of challenges and hardships that our students are facing. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome also that our students deal with. And everybody, I know that's been a big thing for me in my career. I know, Jessica, when you and I were breaking into our PhD, we were like, there are no Latinas like us in our PhD programs, or there are hardly anyone else like us. And so we held on to each other really strong, because, and I know, Alicia, on your teams, you look around and you see teams and you're like, I'm the only person, like woman of color on this entire leadership, or like, so my question is like, to take it a little bit back, like, what are some of the biggest challenges, and it can be personal, professional, that you feel that you've encountered, and how did you overcome those? let's start with that. So if anyone wants to jump in. I know, Jessica, when you got to Berkeley, it was like a big thing. Alicia, I know your challenges, even with math, like you said, you didn't bring all the skill set, but like that was a challenge for you, like even just growing up, you know, like I'd love our students to hear a little bit more of that because they look at people like you now and think you've been superstars your whole life, you know, and that like, that's like, you've always been on top of it. And that's not the case. That's not the story for anyone that I know, you know? So I'd love to hear like some of your challenges and how it felt to go through it and then how you overcame it.
Yeah, I can start because I definitely think like when I think back, and I always tell this story when people ask, like I very distinctly had a really hard time learning math from very young. I remember when I was in 7th grade and I was in, as Marissa was saying, I was in the lowest math class and I was being brought into high school. So it was 8th grade actually. And they were going to put me in this lowest math class. And I really felt that, okay, if I don't get into this, you know, more senior math class. So I studied the whole summer. I think while everybody else was out having fun, I mean, 8th grade summertime, but I was there with a tutor and I was really trying to learn. And after that summer, I, you know, got into this normal math class and that was the beginning. But I think I always struggled with math. And actually, I always knew I wanted to be an industrial engineer. But I knew that because I wasn't the best at science, that I would couple that with an English degree. And the reason for that was that I thought that what would differentiate myself in the professional world in this more technical domain was learning how to communicate really well. You can have people who are very technical, but that inability to communicate and sell your pitch to someone is always going to hold you back. So I was smart. I was, to Jessica's point, resourceful. I thought about, okay, how do I take some areas of opportunity and couple that with something that is my superpower? And I remember, so I did a 5-year degree, 3 years in English literature and 2 years in industrial engineering. And I so vividly remember when I started those engineering classes, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I can't do this. This is too hard. And she was like, okay, that's fine. If you don't want to do this, fine, but go get a job. You're, you know, no longer covering your bills. You're going to do this on your own. And I was very close and it was very hard, but I scrambled by, worked. I think I was at the library every day at Georgia Tech. You know, going to all of the teacher hours, I actually was asked to give a recommendation because I was there so much. Like finding the smart people and learning from them. But I would say, like, I think I graduated barely above the mark. And then I went on and I tried to continue focusing on industrial engineering. But at one point I just said, this is not for me. And then that's how I went to Peru. And that's how I think my career really started, is I had built that foundational knowledge. So what I'm trying to get to is, like, for me, I've always felt like just learn the basics, learn the foundational of what you need to know. You don't need to be the best in it. And in fact, maybe you are the best at the technical skills, but if you don't know how to communicate that, you don't know how to build the relationships and do the whole package. So everyone has your own superpower. And if you don't know what that is, I'm sure Marissa can talk to you, but I know every one of you has a superpower, and that's what's going to help you get on top. And so just having that foundational knowledge for me was like, okay. And that's why I never went back to school, because I was like, I'm done. I don't need to do this anymore. Like, let's get out in the real world. So that's a little bit of my story, but major challenges to overcome. And I think perseverance was the big thing. Just like finish and know that, okay, it's enough and you don't have to keep going. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna just continue on from what Alicia said, which is, you know, when I got to undergrad, you know, I'm a freshman, I got there. There was no one in my high school that was there. You know, all these other kids that I met, they had at least like another kid or some, you know, 2 kids from their high school that went with them to Berkeley. Well, I didn't have anybody. It was just me. And, you know, my parents didn't go to college. Like, they didn't know what I should be doing. Like my only cousin in town, my cousin Monica went to UC Davis, lived at home. Like nobody, there was just nobody to give me guidance. And so I wanted to leave after the first semester. I put in to transfer actually to UC Davis. And my mom told me that I couldn't because I had a scholarship and it lasted at least a year. So she was like, you need to stay for that year because it's free. And so she made me stay, and I joined a group called Hispanic Engineers and Scientists. And it was so nice because I've met kids like myself, kids like myself whose families, it wasn't already a thing to go to college. They were the first ones to go. They were also lost like I was. And even though we were all kind of lost together, at least we were together. And so I would definitely say, no matter where you go, look for people. There's people out there like you. You might feel alone, but there are people out there like you. You might have to look for them. Sometimes you're lucky, they come out and find you. There are programs where they'll come and find you, but don't be afraid to look for them. And what I would tell students as I went on and got older and became, a resident advisor or a teacher in these programs, is that first year, I would say, of all of my years in college, I spent a lot of time in school. That first year was the hardest. And if you can just push through and make it through your first year, honestly, if you can make it through year one, you'll graduate. I mean, I don't know how to tell you more than that. Like if you can push it, you just have to learn to be resilient and to persevere. And that is something that it will serve you for the rest of your life, but you just have to believe in yourself, almost fake it till you make it, honestly, and just seek out help when you need it. Seek out people like you, because that first year is hard. It's very difficult. And knowing that there's somebody who's kind of has a similar background to you, for me was the difference. It was the difference, having a partner. Marissa mentioned there were times when it was just me and her in mechanical engineering. She and I took biology 1A during the summer, pass, no pass, because we weren't sure if we were going to pass. I mean, that's what we had to do. We're like, okay, we're just pass, no pass, because who knows how it's going to go.
I did not pass.
I was gonna tell them one of us passed and one of us didn't. I wasn't gonna tell them.
I did not pass. I did it at the same time as doing a full-time research program. I've told many of you this. And I was so afraid. I was like, because I didn't have to take it. I was already double majoring it. And I just was like, this is going to help me get into PhD bioengineering programs. And I was doing a full-time research internship at Berkeley. And they said, this is your full-time thing. And the Bio 1A said, this is your full-time thing. If you take Bio 1A in the summer, this is your full-time thing. So I did 2 full-time things. I got a D+, did not pass. And I got into every PhD bioengineering program I applied to, including Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, Penn. So it did not affect me. It did not matter. I took on the challenge. I learned a lot, and I did not pass, and it did not define me that I didn't pass. So
Exactly.
just so you all know. Yeah. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah. I mean, you got to keep pushing. Sometimes you're going to get, I remember my very first midterm in school, I got a D. I've never gotten a D in my entire life. And it was in archaeology. So I was just like, this isn't even like a science class. And after that, I learned how to take midterms for non-science classes. But my whole point is stuff's going to happen. You just got to keep pushing, and you got to keep looking for partners and friends and people like you, and just keep pushing. And you will get to the end. So that's what I did. I just kept pushing and believing that I would make it to the end.
Patricio, how about you? What hardships have you faced and overcome? I mean, you're a tenured professor. I know that wasn't easy. So, I know your stories aren't exactly the same. Patricio's a super brain.
I would say that my hardship came after everything what everyone's talking about. But it's not that the earlier parts didn't have their hardships. I think you always got to work hard and try your best. But I think where I went to school, I wasn't the smartest. Like, I mean, there are people who got straight A's. I didn't get straight A's. I got really good grades, but not straight A's. So I don't know. I think that adjusted my expectations, right? So I would say it wasn't hard for me early because the expectations and the demands were balanced in the sense that I demanded the best out of myself, but I didn't create unreasonable expectations. I went to Caltech as an undergrad, but I was planning actually to go to Maryland because my parents were like, we can't afford any private school. You're going to your state school if you don't get a scholarship. So I got lucky, I got a scholarship, but I would have been totally happy at Maryland. You know, I would have gone there. I probably would have done great. I kind of was okay at Caltech because they had a minority student affairs, right? So I went to visit it. Like once I knew I had the scholarship and I was happy. Caltech invites their students to go visit. And so I did the visit and their minority student affairs office was really active. I got to meet other people who were culturally like me, which means that when I started 5 months later, you know, even though Caltech is a weird place, there was this like little subset of not so weird people, or, you know, they shared our weirdnesses, like being a Caltech, but then they also shared my cultural background. So that was all fine. I mean, again, I wasn't the smartest, right? Like, I wasn't the smartest, but I think when I think it was Jessica that said something about a superpower, or Alicia, even though I'm not the smartest, I think there are certain critical thinking skills that I've picked up through all of my experiences that allow me to connect things that other people who are just way more technically gifted than me just simply can't. And that kind of, I think that's kind of why I don't think I suffered, because everywhere along the way, for some funny reason, there was someone who's like, this dude's not really the best, but there's something in him. And they kind of vouched for me. So somebody pulled me. Like, I don't know why, I don't know how, but somebody was always pulling me. Where it became difficult actually was once I got on the tenure track, and it was much harder to find people who could pull me. And there's not really anyone who can push you. And then that's where I struggled, because my success was actually not determined by me. My success was determined by my students and what I could transmit to my students and how effective I was at getting them to excel like I could excel. And I think Alicia talked a lot about communication. I mean, I've spent the last 15 years learning how to communicate because my job is to teach, you know, try to transmit not only the technical skills, but these sort of critical thinking skills. And that's really hard to teach, but I can't say I was good at it, but I did not give up. So that was the thing. I didn't give up. If you talk to my students across the 17 years, every one of them will tell you, you say, how did he manage how did he manage you? You'll get a totally different management strategy. And every time I would fail, I would go research, like, how do you manage people? How do you teach critical thinking skills? There's actually a methodology for research. Like, I would talk to people and then they would teach me like these little nuggets. And then I would piece together a new management approach and try it. And over again. So, and I'm refining my skills. I feel I still have a long way to go. So I think there's something about always demanding the best of yourself, you know, managing your expectations so they're reasonable, but always over longer time periods, you know, demand that expectation, that roof, that ceiling goes up, right? Always going up, and don't give up. Yeah.
Awesome. You guys have included so many nuggets in what you've already said that I want to actually start turning it over to questions from our students early. And then if there's a lull, then I can go ahead and interject with some more things. But I would love you all, there have been 2 questions in the chat, Eric and Christian. Eric, do you want to unmute yourself, introduce yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I had a question for Patricio specifically. I was kind of curious if you ever had funding cut for something you ever wanted to continue working on. And then a second question is, like, if you discover something while you're researching, who owns that technology? Is that the university? Do you get like your name on a patent, or how does that work?
There are different ways of getting grants. Usually I get it through the National Science Foundation, which is sort of like the best kind of, and NIH has an equivalent too, which is the best kind of grant to get, because when they give it to you, it's just like a huge chunk. They're like, okay, we like you. I mean, we like what you sent. We're going to send you the money. And then that's it. It's there. There's no cutting money. But I did get last year, no, 2 years before COVID, I did get a grant from DARPA, and this was a horrible grant, probably the worst grant experience I ever had, because it had this thing called CUI, confidential, I forget, information. So it's like information that's not unclassified, confidential, unclassified information, which means it's not classified, but the US government considers it sensitive enough that only US citizens are allowed to look at it, and only after they've gone through a training process, and only after you've confirmed that the environment in which they have access is controlled, right? Which means I got the grant, but I needed to then create the environment in my university, and no one had done it on the research side, but the people who do, we have an applied research group that is a separate division. They had done it, but they couldn't tell me how to do it. And it took me like 6 months to get it done. And the first phase of the grant was like a year. So basically I went, no, maybe it took me like 4 or 5 months to get it done. And I couldn't get paid off the grant. So I was actually doing work because it started until I got that done. And then 2 or 3 months after I started getting money, they cut the funding. Except I'd already hired the students, and you're only allowed to, you can't fire students, you have to hire them for semester boundaries. So about 2 weeks into the summer, I was told that the grant was cut, which means that I supported them for 3 months at the beginning, and then I had to support them for 3 months at the end. So I had to support them for 6 months without getting money from that project. And it was a real struggle to pull money from all my other grants in order to pay. It was 2 students, so 1 year's worth of student salary from all these different things. So it can, like, DARPA is like really horrible at, like, they can just cut things when they please. They can decide when to give you the money. It's like, it's a nightmare. I don't think I'm ever going to do DARPA, not for like 5 years. But yeah, it happened. And then I think you asked me something else. I forget what it was.
Yeah.
Who owns the patent?
IP. If I make a product, they own the product. If I make something that's like software, that's the real gray zone. They may require me to give them like a cut, like a 5% or 6% cut of however much I make. Or if it's open source, then I don't have to do that. So a lot of times what I do is I just open source all my research, like there on GitHub. And I think we tried the patent once, and what they said was that software cannot be, according to their lawyers, software cannot be patented. It falls under copyright law, and Georgia Tech has that copyright.
Awesome. Christian, because your question is, yes, Jessica, please.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback on Patricio's answer. So where I work, we have 2 NIH grants, and it's nice. So we're, studying how our device can reduce opioid consumption, for example, in one of them. So the nice thing is, if it runs out or if it gets cut, we're ready to pay for things if we need to, but they help with all those startup costs. So it helps tremendously. And as a startup, that's income that we don't have to get from an investor. So there is an inherently risky nature to grants in general, but obviously it's free money. So that's cool. And then similarly to the patents that Patricio was saying, in companies, you'll patent things, but you will always assign them to your company. So you never own them, but you own the patent. You cannot make money off the patent, if that makes sense. So that's how it works in companies. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Great insight. So, okay, good. Now there are questions coming in. Great. Alicia, let's pivot to you. A question came in. Steve, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah. Hi, Alicia. I am the assistant for this program, so I help Marissa with everything. And
also
I really,
Peruvian.
oh yeah. I also really resonated when you're talking about like struggling like with the technical aspect and trying to rely on like being an effective communicator and like working on other aspects to like stand apart. So I was just gonna ask for advice on how, like, what would you do, or what made you an effective communicator, and like how like do you build your network?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so a few different things. So in terms of like effective communication, I think it always comes down to like being really intentional about what you're communicating. So I always think about why are you communicating what you're communicating? What are you actually talking about? And then how, like, how are you going to solve that problem? And I always come back to when people, like, I have a direct report who really struggles with communication. And I'm always just like, very clear, why, what, how. And then when you're communicating, think about like, if you're going to go to an executive and you're going to try to tell them what you're saying, what's the most efficient and effective way you can state what you're saying? I really try to cut like all the noise and distill it into 1 or 2 sentences. So that's that. There's also, in terms of build, and I will say, be authentic in your voice. I think that's something I continue to struggle with, especially like as a leader. Authenticity is really important. And sometimes depending on who you're communicating to, you want to resonate with that audience. And so you're going to change a little bit, but never lose your authenticity. And so that can come out when you're communicating. And I think that I struggle with that, but I'm trying to get better at it. So it's very challenging. In terms of building your network, like I will honestly say, I'm not the best at building your network. I feel like it is a lot of time to invest in. And so for me, it's always like, okay, how do I build my network? I think that what I've seen that people do really well is like blogging about something that they're personally interested in, posting that on LinkedIn, sharing it with audience. Like it's a way to get more organic ability to build your network, but like talk about something you're passionate in. And then like, you know, going to events that you really resonate with, either it be online or in person. Like there's so much cool stuff going on, but maybe pick like one event and then pick like, okay, I'm going to reach out to one person. And then, okay, just see, like, maybe I'll follow up with them on LinkedIn. I've met some really cool people by asking someone, hey, I'm really looking for someone who can help me in this subject, and they'll connect me to someone else. But I'm not someone who has like a huge network. I will just say, I think at my level, there is an expectation that you're out there, you know, sharing your story and all of that. I have a child. I also am getting into being a yoga teacher. And so it's like finding that balance. So I would just say like, maybe the others have better advice here, but I think it's about like finding things that you're genuinely interested in and then finding people who you genuinely want to talk to. But I don't know, for me, I'm not going to email like 1,000 people on LinkedIn just to see if someone gets a response, but people do that and people will respond. It just depends on what you're looking for.
Thank you.
Jessica, yeah, please.
Oh, I was just going to add to what Alicia said. She's talking about the blogging and the posting and all of that. So 2 weeks ago, I was on campus at Berkeley for like a welcome for freshmen event. And, you know, there are all these kids who are freshmen. So anyway, I'm on LinkedIn and I see this kid post about how he went to this pre-engineering program and he had pictures and how he's so excited to start his freshman year. And he hopes to go into aerospace engineering in the future. So I don't do aerospace. I don't know anything about any of that, but my friend JR is the team lead for Boeing and he's trying to find good interns for the future. So I just asked this kid that I see on LinkedIn and his post, because I'm like, oh, I went to that thing. I don't remember that kid in particular, but I went to the same event as him. So I asked to be his friend and I said, hey, can I put you in contact with my friend JR? He's the recruiting lead at Boeing. And so that's what I did. And so there are people, not everyone's going to do that, but that's just an example of where you just kind of put a post, maybe nothing comes of it. Or maybe someone's like, oh, I know somebody, you know, let me introduce you. And that happens a lot. So that's an example of what Alicia was referring to.
Yeah, it's funny because Patricia's staying quiet during this part. I actually, one of my North Stars is to get all my friends in the same place, but which is ironic because now I'm moving back to the East Coast. But I have this vision of getting Patricio to Stanford and then getting his wife to Foothill, actually. Patricio Vela, who has a PhD in math and as a professor. And so I'm like, Patricio, you got to network. He's like, I hate networking. So just so you all know, like, everybody has their strengths and everybody also struggles with networking. So like, it's not something that comes natural to everyone, and you can become successful, but it really, really helps. Like Jessica said, every job along the way. I'm going to stay quiet because now there are a flood of questions coming in, and I want to make sure our students have the space. So I saw questions. Someone just unmute themselves and ask a question. Patricio, go ahead.
I'm going to say one thing, even though I hate networking, you have to do it. But there's one professor who gave me some tips on how you make it better. So in academia, the reason I hate it is because academics like to split people into like, you're part of the in crowd and you're not part of the in crowd. And I hated cliques. I thought they were juvenile in high school. So part of the reason I hate networking in academia is because there is this popular crowd and they're really antagonistic to people who aren't there. And to break into that is sort of like an extreme form of dating. But some advice that another professor gave me, he's like, always at these things, at conferences, there are these awards and these things. And like, he goes, I always signed up to be on those committees because I'm giving awards to those professors' students and they get happy, they like it, they see me. And like, it's this full-on positivity, and that breaks down the dating, sort of the meat market barriers, so then they become nicer to you. So my advice would then be, sometimes if it's more like a meat market dating thing, just be seen, be out there all the time until they see you, and then they start to slowly think of you as part of the in crowd, and then you sort of like ease your way into it. And then I think the other one is just make sure you meet good people. If the person's a jerk in the in crowd, just don't bother. Like, life is short. Like, I've tried to be friendly to some people in this clique, and then I'm like, you know what? You're not worth my time. Like, I don't need you for success. I'll find someone else if you can't pull me up, I'll find someone else where we pull each other up, right? And ultimately, there's enough people out there that are successful and enough people that are driven that you'll always find the way that works for you. There's no one way. That's what I would. I love Covey. Covey is what helped me. I don't know if you know Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and the 8th Habit. So one thing he likes is this thing called the win-win. So every time I ever interact, I'm like, how do we make it a win-win? How do we, even communication, networking, whatever, like, what's the win-win circumstance? There's always a win for both people.
Okay, Patricio and Jessica, I sent you a question in the chat. If you could respond when you get a chance. There are a lot of questions coming in. Stephanie, I love your question. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Hello, I'm Stephanie. I was curious because I recently kind of hit like a wall, feeling burnt out, and kind of wanting to regroup. And I'm someone who considers myself like a jack of all trades and likes to like just do multiple projects. So, but I'm also really passionate about like one specific field. So I guess the sentiment around my question is like, if any of you do consider yourself like that, and how did you, because I also have a problem with committing to like a specific field. So yeah, just anything that like comes up, like how did you like commit to something, and like how do you make room for other like important passions in your life that you also like consider like as a potential career? And most importantly, how do you like make room to recharge and rest? Because I feel like our society like very much like just capitalizes on labor and exploiting like our hard work, and like we're not meant to just go all the time. And I feel like that's really easy to get carried away. So yeah, how do you like just make room for all of that, and just sharing, yeah, anything that comes to mind? It would be really helpful.
Yeah, I can take this one on. So I'll just say, like, taking a step back, my 2 core values are like challenge and self-care. And it's this dichotomy that has helped me throughout my life. But I think it's first being intentional about like why you're doing what you're doing and what you're passionate about. And then from there, figuring out how you best spend your time. Like in my job and any job, they're going to ask you, they're never going to say, oh yes, don't work as much. Well, they might, but like they're always going to want to take as much as they can. And so you have to like first figure out like what you want to do and how you kind of build the life that you want. And so I am really big on boundaries. I think like a lot of people in my job have their cell phone and email on their phone. And like, I have none of that. When it's time to finish working, I try as hard as possible to check out. And that, I mean, this is now, but I'll say like in my career, like absolutely not. Like I remember when I was working at Uber, I was working till 11 p.m. And it's just like, there are going to be moments in life where it's going to be really intense, but like anything that has to be that the next moment then has to be really nice. So this summer I decided we're not going to try, I have a child. We're not going to travel this summer. We're going to say no to everything. And we're going to intentionally keep our weekends free. And that's given me the time through this pandemic and feeling burnt out of just like recharging. And now I have some trips coming up for work, but I'm excited about it instead of feeling really anxious about it. And I'm also going to start teaching yoga actually at a studio nearby. And for me, because I'm also a very creative person, I just know that to balance that highly technical, I need to like get into my more like authentic teaching of yoga. And so it will help me be smarter at work. So I've never been big on like putting multiple hours in, but what I'm really big on is efficiency, doing something really effectively. And so I probably work less, but I work smartly. And that's, I think, at some point in life, I just decided enough is enough. I'm not going to let anybody's expectations dictate my life. I dictate my life and I decide what I want to do. And everyone else is going to tell you something else. So learning your inner voice has taken me a long time, but I think now I feel comfortable that my life feels a little bit more manageable. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about this. I could talk about this for hours.
Yes, I just want to tell the students, because there are a lot of students coming in, a lot of questions coming in. Jessica and Alicia have offered to stay on until the end of our session, which is 12:30. And Patricio, I don't know if you're able to, but if you have to jump off, then he can stay on. Great. Ali, go to the bathroom. Go now. She's just like, I have to go to the bathroom really quick. But so for those of you who are now, a lot of questions are coming in. We still have another 20 minutes with our panelists. So thank you so much to our panelists. And hopefully we'll get to everyone's questions. I don't have any more questions. I'm just going to address those of you. But Jessica, please go.
Oh, I was just going to just echo what Alicia said about setting the boundaries. And that's something that I think as I went into the workforce, especially at startups, there's just this culture set that you just work and work and work and work, you know? And I think what's kind of nice, the younger generations are coming up and they are setting those boundaries, which I appreciate. And you know, now, so I have two kids. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and my daughter's taking swimming lessons. Yesterday, she wanted me to go after the swimming lesson and like play with her, practice swimming. So at 2:30 p.m., I was able to be there, and I have a job that's flexible enough that I can be there at swimming lessons and swim with her for half an hour, you know, but it might mean that, you know, maybe yesterday was a long day. So I don't care that I'm taking, you know, time out to go swimming in the middle of the day. But it might mean also that I wake up and do work from 6 to 7 a.m. before I wake them up. But I have that luxury of setting my own time. I do think that's more likely to happen with certain, obviously, technical remote type jobs. But I think it also comes with being intentional, like Alicia said. You know, I know I'm going to be in the office these hours and I'm going to work, right? I'm not going to chat with everybody. I'm going to work because when I'm turning off the computer and going to swimming lessons or taekwondo or whatever, then I am there all the way with my kid and not thinking about who I need to email or do other things with. And it's just about being very intentional with your time, because you deserve to have downtime. And you may have to force it on others, and maybe you might even have to force it on yourself, but you deserve it and you have to protect it.
Awesome. Patricio, Christian, you had a question for Patricio about tenure. Do you want to unmute and ask if you're there? Christian is not there. Okay. Arnaldo, you had a question for Jessica. Arnaldo, do you want to unmute and ask?
Absolutely. So I have it here in my notes. I really liked what you said about hard work, resilience, paying off. That really, really resonated with me. That's been actually my solution. I came out of the military a few years back and just really struggled. And over the last year, it's just been hard work, lots of volume, and tons of sacrifice. However, you also mentioned that to find partners. And I'm afraid that the hard work will eventually have its limits. And you said find partners. Are we talking like classmates? Like, could you expand on that a little bit? I might have had an experience with it because recently I was about to take a math class and I didn't want to. I was a little worried about it. Some former classmates said, you can do it, and gave me a little push. Because of them, I went into this math class, made it happen. Kind of surprised me a little bit. Yeah, could you expand a little bit on partners? I'm thinking maybe you mean something like that.
Yeah, I think there's two kinds of partners that I was talking about. One was alluded to by Patricio and the other one by Alicia. So one, Alicia mentioned what I would call study up, which is find people in your class who are smarter than you and study with those people, because it's going to be a benefit to you, and it's probably going to be a benefit for them as well. So that's one thing, is study up, find those people smarter than you or who have better study skills than you do. And I used to just copy people's different study skills and figure out what worked for me. But the other thing is you need to find those positive people. Like Patricio was saying, you meet people, you're networking, and some people are going to help lift you up, right? They're going to hold you up, and other people are they're dragging you down, and life is too short to deal with those people. And I'll give you one example. So when I was an undergrad with Marissa, I had this scholarship, right? And I lost my scholarship. And I was just like, just down about it. And Marissa said, I think you should apply, because my grades had come up. They had found out I had a learning disability and all. And she's like, I think you should apply and see if you can get it back. And I was like, they're not going to give that back to me. Like, that's a lot of money. And she was like, no, come on, you could do it. Just try. And lo and behold, I applied for it and they gave it back to me, tens of thousands of dollars. And I wouldn't have done that on my own. I wouldn't have thought to do it. And Marissa was like, no, I think you can, just try. And so you need those people who are going to lift you up or who are going to encourage you. But then there's the other people who are actually like, in the gritty times, like you just got to actually do homework with them. So there's two kinds of partners, I would say. Yeah.
Awesome, got it. I never considered the having two different types of partners. I really appreciate that. Study up is going to be no problem for me. There's a lot of much smarter people, and I have no problem bugging. So, thank you very much, Jessica.
I know Patricio wanted to add. You can go ahead.
Oh, no, I changed my mind.
Oh, okay. Well, Eli, do you want to unmute? You had a question for Patricio and Jessica?
Yeah, so Alicia kind of talked about this earlier, but were there non-technical, non-STEM classes that you guys took as undergraduates, which you thought helped to prepare you for your careers?
I mean, I took classes that I thought were fun and interesting. I took a class on the history of the southern border. I took classes on Greek mythology. They were just something that I was interested in that was kind of fun. I wouldn't say that they directly prepared me, but they also gave me exposure to people who aren't just engineers. And so I had to talk with them in discussion section, understand how they thought, and because the thought processes were different. So it was just helpful just being exposed to different ways of thinking and different ways of communicating. But it wasn't for that express purpose, but I certainly enjoyed it. And I definitely recommend, if you have a chance to take a class that you enjoy, that's not necessarily STEM related, to give it a go.
I would say the classes that I think non-technical, they may still be considered technical because I went to a technical college. But the non-technical classes that I think were helpful to me were economics and cognitive science, and both for the exact same reason. Not economics because of like economic theory, but there's a like more modern form of economics that they call experimental economics, where they put people in these situations and then they play these little games with them and they deal with money, and they figure out how people handle money, how they don't handle money. But so the economics people like sort of do these weird things, and they kind of, the result is this is how people think, this is how people behave. And if you want to sort of, I don't know if control society is, but if you want to guide society, this is how economic theory says you should create laws or you should do things. But learning about how sort of people respond to economic circumstances and how they think, sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but when I read these experiments, it kind of expands my mind and lets me think about people and my interactions with people more flexibly, because I see all these different ways that they can manifest a response, but for very different reasons. Can be different responses or the exact same response. Cognitive science is the same thing, except without money, right? They'll put all these little experiments and do things with people and figure out how do you get them to, can they remember it? Can they not remember it? Will they respond? Will they not respond, right? Cognitive science is weird things. Like if I give you a list of 5 things and I want you to 5 minutes later, tell me one of those words. If it was the last word, you're more likely, I don't remember the experiment, but if it was the first word, there's a certain probability of remembering. If it was the last word, there's another probability if it's the middle word. So they do all these weird tricks with people to figure out how they think, and psychology. So like these ones, for me, they resonated, and I keep, and my Google Newsfeed keeps sending me like studies of like all the things that people do now to like figure out how other people think and work. And it sort of helps me, like when I interact with people, to try to figure out like, what's their frame? What's the paradigm? How does my understanding of behavior in people like map to my situation? So I don't know. So I don't get like sucked into the negativity of it, but like I can find the positive. I can make the win-win, right? My cubby, how do I make the win-win? I love those classes. I still read those, like Gladwell and, you know, like the cheesy, like research summary type stuff. Malcolm Gladwell, I read those.
Thank you,
Amazing.
guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, Eitan, you had a question.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, for anybody who wants to answer this. But yeah, if you could go back to your undergrad days, would there be anything you would do differently? And it doesn't necessarily have to be from an academic viewpoint. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, I would have taken these classes, or like, you know, it can be like habits, or I don't know, relations with people, like anything that you would have done differently.
I think this is for anyone. They're like deeply thinking.
Yeah, I don't think I would have changed anything.
Yeah, I mean, there were times of struggle, but I think that what I learned in overcoming those struggles is what is serving me now. So if I would have removed, you know, like part of me says I should have done there was a pre-engineering program that was offered to me, and I did not partake in it because I needed to work instead. Part of me says I should have gone to that, but at the same time, I don't know if I would have built the skills to overcome challenges if I hadn't done that, you know. So I'm not one to look back and try and change things, but yeah, sorry, it's not.
No, I think the thing is like, you know, there are a million things I would have done differently, but then I wouldn't be who I am today. And I love where I'm at and what I'm able to do because of all of the things kind of like I did quote wrong, but now I have such insight because of all of the ways that I went, you know? And I think we all kind of feel that way. Ali, go ahead.
No, I will say like, so I went to school actually to run track, and there was a point that I got so injured freshman year that I quit running track, and it was really painful. But recently I started running again, and I actually ran 15 miles, and I haven't done that again. But I just realized that, wow, even things when I was really young that I had to quit doing come back, and you never realize it. And then from quitting track, I started dancing again at Emory, and that brought me so much passion. So for me, it's actually like the unacademic stuff that I love doing, to spend more time doing that because it makes life feel full. And when it doesn't work out, it's okay. Is there something else that you can do? But I don't know. I've always found it really important to have the physical and the mental to keep me healthy. And that has come to serve me even now, you know, when you're not sleeping, but you're like, okay, I'm going to get like a little yoga restorative. It just kind of, so finding your hobbies and not going to college and saying, you know what, now I'm here, I'm going to study and I'm never going to think about my health and mental well-being. Like, don't stop just because you're in school, like keep it going. And then after school, keep it going. So, yeah.
Awesome. Kwang, you want to unmute and ask your question?
I figured out my question is kind of similar to Aton, so I have another question, but I think I can wait till that.
No, please go. This is speed round. We have 7 minutes left.
I think someone else can ask a question first.
Okay, Daniel, you had a question. Daniel Chavez, are you there?
Yeah. So like a lot of us have paths to our goals that are non-linear, and I was wondering, like specifically for Jessica, I guess, what was something that helped you stay grounded in your academic journey?
When you say grounded, are you meaning continuing on the path? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. So
for me, you know, I came from a farming community. Most of the people didn't go to college. And it was, you know, to be honest, people were just like, why are you going to college? When I decided to go. And my mother was very invested in me going to college. She was just like, this is the way that you're going to have more choices than what, you know, my dad and her had. They worked in the fields. You know, anybody who's ever driven by the fields, seeing people working in them, that's a hard job. You know, it was, for me, you know, so it depends on how you view it. Some people view it as pressure. Some people keep it as a reminder to themselves, like, hey, why am I doing this? Like, why am I going to school? And I had a very clear reason why I was going to school. And it was to have a life and to have options that were more open than what my parents had available to them. And so that was something that I reminded myself, like, okay, that's why I'm keeping on going, to have these options, to do this thing that my parents dreamed of. And I don't necessarily suggest that all of you have that as your motivator, but it was something that underlied what I was doing and kept pushing me forward, because they believed in me, and I felt like that kept me going when I didn't believe in me. So that kept me grounded and remembering what the point of this was and why I'm going to college. But it also helped that I had friends at school who had similar struggles from similar backgrounds, and we were kind of moving forward together. So all of that was what helped me. I don't know if that answers your question, but that was it for me.
Yeah, we're at the 5-minute mark, and I would love to ask our speakers one. So Jessica, and can you all hear me? Yes, okay. Jessica and, okay, Kwang, quick, go.
Oh no, if there isn't time, then we don't have to go to it. It's fine.
Kwang, just ask it. We can do a 30-second answer.
Okay, so this one's for Alicia, but it's open for other panelists to answer if you'd like. But since you've known Marissa for so long, like, how would you compare her behaviors as a teenager or as a child to how she is right now? Like, do you have any embarrassing stories? And if you have any baby pictures or anything like that, it might also be helpful.
Okay, I will share my baby pictures. Ali, do you want to do a 30-second answer to that?
Well, Marissa's always been my big sister. I think she's 10 years older than me. So I just, like, she was really into 90s clothes, I think, you know, and I just remember all those photos. And I look back at it, I'm like, okay, I was an 80s baby. This is my 90s big sis. But No, she's always been my big sister in every way of the world. So I don't know. I don't even remember the question, but just an amazing sister.
Yes. Okay, so I want to give our speakers a quick chance to like last minute advice. Like, what is the biggest piece of advice that you think you can give our students today? Just quick speed round. And also, okay, you guys, in the final presentations, I will share a couple embarrassing stories at the wrap up, all right? Or embarrassing pictures, since you guys want to see pictures. I did do this with our pre-STEM cohort, so I'll do that. So last minute advice, and then also Jessica and Alicia have put in the chat how you can reach out to them. They've both shared their LinkedIn and their email. Patricio, if you can put in the chat how students can reach out to you, if they have follow-up questions or they just want to connect and learn more, like Alicia said, she said it, y'all, like contact me, I could talk about this forever. So all of this that I've been saying, like form connections, she like literally gave an open invitation for y'all to contact her and build a relationship with her. So Patricio, if you could put that in the chat, and then last minute advice that you could give our students. Go ahead.
Me? Or I'll go. I guess the last minute advice that I would give is, I had a student, I'm going to give a story and then the answer is, he came to me and I think he had something was wrong with his teeth and he needed money. So he wanted to borrow money and he was really stressed out and he was like, oh my God. And I was like, all right. So I had just gone through like a root canal and he needed a root canal. So I totally understood. And I was like, yeah, don't worry. I'll loan you the money. We'll deal with whether you pay it back later or not. But then I was like, don't worry about the money, because I mean, he was in a PhD program. I was like, this is the poorest you're ever going to be. Like once you have the PhD and you get a job, I mean, you're going to be earning like 6 times what you're getting right now as a grad student. Like there's no reason to worry. And the corollary to that is like, I think life doesn't have one trajectory for success. It has many trajectories for success. And no matter how deep down or how, whatever it is, just think like, is the success I'm aiming for the only kind of success that exists? Or are there alternative trajectories that will give me success too? And as long as you can always identify an alternative trajectory that is robust to some failure, then you're gonna be richer, like whether that's intellectually richer, fiscally richer, whatever, you will make it. Like, so there was that burnout thing, or you do have to redefine, like, shed responsibility, make sure you take care of yourself. But like, if you've got that taken care of and you're just stressed about whether you're going to get there or not, there's always win-win. There's win-win-win-win-win-win-win. You just got to be open to what that trajectory looks like. Don't expect it to look like one thing. Always be open to some alternative.
I love that.
Envision it too.
So I'll give a little bit of a different advice. I know that y'all are only, you're in college, but someday you're going to get your first job, or maybe you've had an internship, and someday you're going to have to negotiate your salary. So I've been through it all and I've undervalued myself. And so the thing I'll say is, like, know your worth and do research and ask other people, and always ask for more, to be frank. I know it's not the sexiest thing to say, but trust me, I look at so many people and I know, typically they'll ask for less, or, they won't value themselves. And I have to be in that negotiation being like, actually, maybe you should blah, blah, blah. And I always see the same thing. So just, even though it's going to come in 5 to 10 years and you might forget this, just know that, like, when you go into that first negotiation of your job, know your worth and don't let anybody else define your worth but you. I think that will serve you really well as you start, especially if you go in tech. It's such a fluctuation about how much people get paid. It feels sometimes like random. And so do your research and know your worth.
Great advice.
My last 30-second thing is just going to be, don't be afraid to ask for help or to reach out. Reach out to us that you're heard from today. Reach out to whoever you want to learn more about, or just don't be afraid to ask. People want to help you. You just got to ask.
Yes. Thank you, Jessica. So all of you, some of you who haven't even like reached out to the PI in your lab or like the highest up in your lab because you're like, I'm afraid to ask. Like people want to help students, you know, and like all of our speakers have shared their email. So with that, I know we're over time. Can we just take a quick picture? Can someone do a screenshot? So everyone with the speakers highlighted, just smile.
Can we tell everybody to turn on their cameras and if we can do
Can
that?
everyone turn on their cameras? Let's do one with the speakers highlighted and then we'll do one with the whole everyone. So we'll do 2 views. So Steve, can you screenshot it?
I don't know if I can screenshot on this. Wait.
All right, Sophia,
I can do
you
it.
screenshot?
I got it.
Okay.
I got it. I
Okay,
got it.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, that's the
Okay, and let's do
speakers.
the whole, let's do
Okay,
the whole
if everybody
gallery.
could turn on your cameras, please.
Abril,
Like,
Freddie,
begging
Azan,
people.
cameras on.
Wonderful. Freddie, I saw you earlier.
Abril, okay, let's just do it.
Okay, everybody smile, cheese. You can do some peace fingers, whatever you want to do. Okay, one more. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, Patricio, and Alicia. On behalf of all of our students and myself and SLI and Foothill College, this panel went, I mean, did you all get a lot of like great stuff from this? Yeah, this panel went so much more beautifully than I ever could have imagined. You brought so much authenticity to your stories and your voice. I hope that this is the first of many times we are together doing these kinds of things. And you all had such incredible stories to share. Students reach out. All 3 have shared their email address. That is a coveted thing in the era of email. My sister has an open invitation to connect with her. She says she wants to talk as much as possible. And I know she's also looking to actively be more involved in like mentoring and helping students. So, you know, if there are more of their stories or you want to connect with them one-on-one, please reach out. And for everyone, if anyone wants to stay on, so Patricio and Jessica and Ali will bid farewell. Thank you so much for so much of your time.